I straighten the cuff of my silk blouse and glance out the floor-to-ceiling window. The city looks almost unreal from the 42nd floor, tiny yellow cabs inching along the avenues, sunlight bouncing off steel and glass like it's trying to outshine me. On the wall behind my desk, my degree hangs in a brushed gold frame. The ink on it hasn't faded, though the moment I earned it feels like it belongs to someone else entirely. I lean back in my leather chair, the faint scent of coffee from the mug beside me wrapping around my senses. There's a knock on my office door. My assistant pokes her head in, holding out my phone. "It's your mother," she says softly, as if that name might crack something in me. My stomach tightens. Mom hasn't called me directly in years. Most of the time, if there's news, it trickles through cousins or the occasional awkward email from Dad. I take the phone, feeling its weight like it's some kind of test. "Hello." My voice is steady, but my pulse is a quiet drumbeat in my ears. She doesn't start with a greeting. Instead, she says, "We're in the city. We'd like to see you." I glance at my degree. Bold black letters spelling out my achievement, the same one they couldn't bother to witness in person. My nails drum against the desk. I remember the empty seats on that day, how I'd told myself they must have had a good reason. Back then, I didn't realize that their absence would shape me more than their presence ever could. "Sure," I say, my tone cool even. "Come by my office." I hang up before she can hear the smile in my voice. Not joy, something sharper. It was May in Boston, the air warm enough to feel like possibility. My graduation gown hung loose over my frame, the black fabric brushing my knees as I lined up with the other seniors. My heart was a restless bird, beating against my ribs. 4 years of late nights, ramen dinners, and part-time jobs had led me here. I scanned the crowd, searching for them. Mom's blonde hair, Dad's easy smile. I had even picked the perfect seats for them the day before, second row, right where they could see me walk across the stage. But when I found those seats, they were empty. My fingers tightened around the edges of my cap. Maybe traffic. Maybe a last-minute emergency. I kept telling myself that as name after name was called, the applause ringing out for everyone else's family. When it was my turn, I forced my mouth into a smile for the cameras. The diploma felt heavier than I expected, like it carried not just achievement, but the weight of every doubt I had swallowed. I stepped off the stage, glanced back at the crowd once more, still no one. After the ceremony, the campus buzzed with hugs, flowers, and photographs. I stood alone under a blooming magnolia tree, the petals drifting down like confetti no one threw for me. My phone stayed silent. No text, no call. That night, I sat on my twin bed in the apartment I shared with 2 roommates. My friend, Jenna, stopped by and placed something on my desk, a sleek silver pen. "For signing all the big contracts you're gonna land," she said, her smile fierce. "And for writing your own story." Her faith was a life raft I didn't know I needed. I clicked the pen, the sound sharp in the quiet room, and made a decision. I would stop waiting for them to see me. I'd build something they couldn't ignore. So, I emailed a company I'd been eyeing for months, offering to intern for free if that's what it took. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anyone except Jenna. That was the night I began charting a course far away from their approval, and closer to my own. The internship wasn't glamorous. My first desk was really just a corner of a shared table in a cramped co-working space that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and printer ink. My title was marketing assistant, but most days I fetched coffee runs, answered phones, and organized the same stack of sample catalogs 3 times over. But I watched. I listened. I studied every pitch meeting, memorized the way the senior executives spoke about strategy, timing, and market positioning. I stayed late, long after the others left, practicing email drafts, rewriting ad copy, and building mock presentations that no one had asked me for, at least not yet. 2 months in, my boss, Claire Mitchell, noticed. Claire was everything I wanted to be, sharp, commanding, and unapologetically herself. She wore bold lipstick in boardrooms full of men who underestimated her, and she always left with the contract signed. One night, she stopped by my desk at 8:45 p.m., holding a cold cup of tea. "You're still here?" she asked. I almost apologized, but instead I said, I'm working on an idea for the Rivera account. I think their campaign could, well, hit harder. She leaned over, scanned my notes, and raised an eyebrow. Come in early tomorrow. You're presenting this to the team. That pitch became my first big win. Rivera signed a 6-month deal. Claire gave me a paid position the following week.
From there, it was a slow climb.
The hours were brutal. I worked weekends, holidays, birthdays. Some nights I collapsed on my couch still wearing my heels. But every deal I closed, every client I impressed, built a little more weight under my feet, a foundation that was mine alone. At 27, I signed my first major independent client and decided it was time to stop building someone else's empire. I rented a tiny office, just enough for me, a desk and a thrift store lamp, and started my own marketing agency. I never told my parents. Online, I posted vague updates about busy with work or trying new projects. It wasn't that I wanted to hide my success out of spite. I just didn't want to give them the satisfaction of being part of my story after they had walked out of it. The tiny office became 2 rooms, then a whole floor. I hired a team. Claire even came on board as a consultant. My first Skyscraper lease felt like a victory parade in itself. The floor-to-ceiling windows, the private conference room, and the corner office where I hung my degree in its golden frame. Every morning, I passed it on my way in. I didn't see paper and ink. I saw the empty chairs from that day. I saw Jenna's silver pen. I saw every long night, every ignored text, every moment I told myself, keep going. And I did. They arrived 20 minutes early. I could see them through the frosted glass wall of the reception area. Mom in a pale blue cardigan, Dad in a sport coat that looked a little too big on him. They were sitting stiffly on the leather couch, hands folded, eyes darting around the room like they were somewhere they didn't belong. Send them in, I told my assistant. When the door opened, I stood from behind my desk.
Hi, I said.
My voice was even, polite, but I could feel the undercurrent, like holding back the tide. Mom smiled, tentative. You look wonderful. Thanks, I said, gesturing to the seating area by the windows. Come, sit. They walked past the art on the walls, abstract pieces in deep blues and golds, ones I'd chosen because they reminded me of possibility. Dad's eyes flicked to the massive oak conference table in the adjoining room, the shelves lined with books and awards. But I watched their gaze settle on the framed degree behind my desk. You hung it here, Dad said softly. Yes, I replied. Seems fitting, since I spend most of my days in this office. The view's better than the ceremony. Mom's lips pressed together. She didn't respond, but her eyes moved around the space, the skyline beyond the glass, the leather-bound notebooks stacked neatly on the credenza, the silver pen resting in its stand on my desk. This is quite the job you have, Dad said. I met his gaze. It's not a job. It's my company. The silence was thick enough to touch. Your company? Mom repeated.
Yes.
I own this agency. We handle multi-million-dollar accounts. 35 employees. 2 offices. And I leaned back slightly, letting my words breathe. We're expanding to LA next year. Dad blinked, as if trying to reframe the daughter he thought he knew. We had no idea. No, I said. You didn't. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth filled every inch of the room without me forcing it. I thought you were struggling, Mom admitted. That's what your cousin said. I let a small smile curve my lips. That's what I let people believe. Why? She asked, her voice smaller now. I met her eyes, and the years of silence and distance collapsed into a single sentence. Because the last time I had something important to celebrate, you didn't show up. Her face flushed pink, but she didn't look away. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I told myself you must have had a good reason. I continued, but then the years went by. And I realized maybe you just didn't believe in me enough to be there. So I stopped asking you to. The only sound was the faint hum of the city outside the windows. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. We were wrong. Yes, I said simply. They looked around again, but differently this time. Not like tourists in someone else's world, but like people realizing they'd been standing outside the door of it for years. Would you show us more? Mom asked quietly. I rose from my chair. Of course. I walked them through the office, the brainstorming area with its glass boards covered in bright marker ink, the awards shelf, the lounge where my team laughed over lunch most days. Every step seemed to pull the air tighter between us. When we returned to my office, Mom lingered by my desk, eyes on the degree. Her fingers brushed the edge of the silver pen. You've built something incredible, she said. Yes, I replied. And I built it without you. We sat back down, the skyline now washed in late afternoon gold. The sunlight stretched across my desk, catching on the edges of the degree frame like it was under a spotlight. So, Dad began carefully, maybe we could be part of things now. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. Part of things? I repeated. That depends on what you mean by that. Mom glanced at Dad before speaking. We'd like to know you better. To be closer. We've missed a lot. I took a slow breath, choosing my words. Here's the thing. I'm not looking to rewrite the past. But I am willing to consider a different future. That comes with conditions. They both straightened a little, as if bracing themselves. First, I said, respect. No belittling my choices. No doubting my abilities. If you have concerns, you bring them to me like adults, not whispered through relatives. They nodded, but I could tell they weren't expecting the next one. Second, effort. You don't get to just show up when it's convenient. You call. You ask. You show up for the little things, not just the milestones. That's how you earn trust. Mom swallowed hard. And the third, I said, my voice steady, is change. I want you to start living your own dreams instead of criticizing mine. If that means taking a class, starting a business, volunteering, I don't care. But I won't be the only one growing. Silence filled the room for a moment, and I let it. These aren't punishments, I added. They're boundaries. And boundaries are the only reason I can sit here today and speak to you without resentment poisoning every word. Dad rubbed his jaw, looking out the window as if the city might have answers. Mom kept her eyes on me. Can we try? She asked softly. I leaned back, crossing my legs, the leather chair creaking beneath me. You can. And if you do, maybe one day we'll look back on this as the day we started again. I didn't smile to soften the words. I didn't need to. They understood. In the silence that followed, I picked up the silver pen from its stand, turning it slowly between my fingers. This pen was given to me the night I decided to stop waiting for you, I said. If you want to be part of my life now, it's because you've earned a place, not because you've claimed it. Dad met my eyes and nodded. Mom's gaze dropped, but there was a small, determined spark in it. For the first time in years, I felt the balance shift. And it was entirely in my favor. It didn't happen overnight. Change rarely does. But in the weeks that followed, I noticed small shifts. Mom started texting, not just, how are you, but real messages, telling me about the gardening class she'd signed up for, sending photos of her first tomato seedlings. Dad emailed me links to marketing articles he thought I'd find interesting, even if they were a little outdated. They showed up for my agency's charity gala, not as VIP guests, but as quiet supporters, blending into the crowd, smiling when our team won a local business award. They didn't try to insert themselves into my spotlight. They stood in the back, clapping. One Sunday morning, I met them for brunch. No tension. No old wounds disguised as small talk. Just coffee, omelets, and the sound of genuine laughter. Later that afternoon, I returned to my office. The city was hushed in that lazy weekend way, the sky painted with soft streaks of pink and gold. I closed the door behind me and let my eyes travel to the wall. My degree was still there, catching the fading light. But today, my gaze fell to the silver pen beside it. I picked it up, feeling its weight. I thought about the girl who once sat alone under the magnolia tree, diploma in hand, waiting for a family that never came. I thought about the woman who had walked into this skyscraper office and claimed every inch of it as her own. And I realized something. The pen wasn't just a reminder of who wasn't there for me. It was proof of who I had been for myself. I placed it back in its stand, smiling softly. The city outside pulsed with light, and for the first time in a long time, so did I. I leaned against the window, my reflection overlapping with the skyline. They skipped my graduation, I murmured under my breath, almost like a confession. Then I straightened my shoulders, letting the truth sharpen into something else. But now, I said, my voice steady, my degree hangs in my skyscraper office. And I wouldn't change a thing.